What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Alpha Girl Confidence Podcast. I'm your host, Shay Haddo, and on today's episode, I sat down with Jaimee Cooper, who is a past guest. She is a soccer nutritionist coach for athletes and for their families. She does such amazing work, which you're going to find out a little bit more on why she's so amazing on this podcast. But in this podcast, we went deep, not just with nutrition, but so many things that nutrition affects. We talked about how parents can best support and kind of plan meals around busy fall schedules. I know that's one of the biggest things that parents stress out about. So I know that's going to be really valuable for you. We talked about the biggest obstacles that she sees with the athletes that she works with, how parents play a role in the nutrition of their athletes and the whole family in general. She talked about how parents can know if athletes are maybe not eating enough, kind of what are the red flags to watch out for. And we just dove, like I said, into a lot of really incredible stuff, even around, parent comparison and how parents feel like they have to be perfect all the time. And we talked about some good stuff regarding that. So I'm really looking forward to diving into the episode. Make sure when you're done listening, you check out the resources in the show notes. Jaimee has some really awesome resources and a really great social media. So I'm excited for you to listen to the show. Enjoy. What's up, Jaimee? Welcome back to the podcast. As we were saying earlier, it's been at least a few years, maybe more than 2 to 3 years since you've been on. Excited to finally have you back on. And since you are a repeat guest, there's probably a lot of people that don't know who you are because it has been so long. So I'd love to hear just a little quick cliff notes of, what it is that you do, why you do it, how you kind of got into that work.
Yeah, so I'm Jaimee. I'm a registered dietitian. I played college soccer. Didn't realize how much nutrition was missing from my soccer development, and just so happened to be that I was on track to become a registered dietitian. So, unfortunately, I learned all this information after majority of my career was already over. So really, I now like to work with families and young athletes to really help them learn how to use nutrition in a way that isn't stressful, but also helps them to be able to perform on the field.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like for me too, like I never thought about really nutrition like when I played. It was just I don't know, just eating terrible food, stuff that wasn't really the best for me, and just like not even really paying attention to how it would affect my performance. And I think that's probably true for a lot of athletes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I literally had no idea and wondering why I was so sluggish.
So what do you find with the athletes that you work with and just people that come to you and ask you questions? Like, what do you find is like their biggest challenge with nutrition?
I think it just comes down to there's more nutrition advice out there or available. So now there's just so much noise.
Oh yeah,
in what people should do. So when we were playing, there was crickets. Nutrition wasn't even really talked about. It was like other things like lift, run more, train more. But I think now what I'm seeing are a lot of parents and a lot of players who are interested in nutrition, but there's just so much information out there now that it's hard to disseminate what they should be doing. So then they're it's too much, so they're kind of paralyzed with where they should even start. Yeah.
What do you find is the kind of worst nutrition advice that you see on social media, or the thing that bugs you the most?
There's probably, I could probably think of a lot. But I think it's just the way that nutrition is talked about. There's no room for nuance. Because we're all different. You are different than me in what you've experienced and how you've experienced food. And there's no room for nuance, which is unfortunate.
That's true.
And I think that people are scared of food. I think that carbohydrates have been, really have a negative connotation to them when all athletes really need to be using carbohydrates as their preferred source of energy, but our culture says they're bad. And I think that right there puts kids at a disadvantage because then they're trying to use foods that aren't going to give them the same energy, and they're not eating enough of them to be able to sustain that energy.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. Like, obviously, there's so much information out there, and it is kind of turned into a bit of like fear mongering. Like everything is bad for you, everything is poisonous. So and it's like, well, what can I actually eat? And I think that's one dangerous thing with nutrition, whether it's with athletes or just, with normal people, so to say. But what would you say if we were to kind of like break it down and like, okay, where do I start? Like, what are your kind of tried and true kind of just simple principles on nutrition that you would just, start with someone?
Super basic is make sure you're eating all 3 meals. So like breakfast, lunch, dinner. So for a lot of kids, they may eat something, which is better than nothing, but I'd prefer them to have like an actual meal at breakfast time. So that might mean that they wake up 10 minutes earlier or have it prepped maybe the night before so that they can just like wake up and take it on the go. Lunch can be a difficult thing for kids because they have some of these kids have only 10 minutes to eat. And so it's not like they can just like heat up their food in the microwave for 2 minutes and then they have 8 minutes to try to eat and socialize with their friends. So trying to find options that work with them. But within that, I think making sure they have some type of protein at a meal, carbohydrates like rice, pasta, bread, tortilla wraps, something like that. And then having some sort of like fruit, vegetables, if possible. Having that stuff at a meal is going to be really helpful. And then having some type of like fat in there would be ideal.
Right.
And that is going to look different for everybody depending on their situation.
I mean, it really is then about, yes, it is basic, but it's kind of like diversifying in a little bit.
Yeah.
Like in a way, right? It's like, okay, we have kind of our 3 macros in there, and it's like throwing in fruits and vegetables and, trying to make those fruits and vegetables probably as diverse as you can, which, that's a little bit more complex, but still it's like trying to diversify your plate with the simple things, it seems like, is kind of like the simple thing to go by.
Yeah. And I think nutrition is like a big picture thing, because if we are too focused on the minutia, like all the details of every single meal, every single day, like we're going to think that we're not doing it right. And there's no perfect diet. Every day is not meant to be perfect, because we do things differently every single day. We're hit with different stressors and different things come up. So if we can look at like the overall big picture and say like, look, not all meals are going to be perfect. You may not have a fruit or a vegetable at a meal. If that's not happening every single day, that's okay. Like we just want to be able to have some type of framework, and we practice that every single day.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to when you said that like the nutrition industry doesn't have like much nuance. It's like there's no individualization, so to say. Mm-hmm. And that made me think of how so often we're told that this is a good food and this is a bad food. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I believe that it's a good food for you if you can digest it and it does what's right for you, but it's a bad food if it's something that you can't digest. So talk about like that a little bit.
I think that we like to, in like a perfect world, like, oh, just give me a list of like good foods and bad foods, and I'll follow that. For sure. But like life isn't like that. And what might be a good food in one situation might technically be a bad food in another situation. So it's situationally, we could probably say like this is helpful and unhelpful, but the food itself may not be good or bad. For instance, like I tell my clients, a salad, people automatically think that that's a great food. But if we're going to have that like 2 hours, an hour before a game, I can promise you're not going to be thinking the same thing, because that takes a lot of work on your stomach. So when we can really take those labels out of the equation and just speak about food neutrally and understand that all foods have their place. A donut is probably not going to be something that you eat all day, every day in large heaping amounts. It's not going to make you feel good. But a donut, maybe in the afternoon when you don't have practice, and it's for, you're celebrating a classmate's birthday, like
the donut.
that can be awesome and bring community in there. So I think we just need to take away those labels because I think they're really unhelpful.
Yeah, it's like it's not just like black and white all the time. Like I know as humans we like to make things like you said, like we just want a list of but a lot of times you kind of have to like test it out, right? Like I'm sure you've had players come to you and be like, "Hey, give me an idea for a pregame," and maybe that didn't sit well, and it's like, okay, that didn't work for you. Like try something else. And so yeah, I think it's important that people don't just take like, "Oh, she said to eat this, so I have to eat this." It's like try it, see how you feel, and then make adjustments from there, right?
Exactly. I wish people would be able to get a little bit more sense of what I even do with a client, because oftentimes, I'm not making these blanket recommendations for someone. They may ask me that question and then I will ask them, well, how did it make you feel? And if they said didn't make me feel good, well, maybe it's not the food per se. It might be, well, when did you eat it? Was it too close to when you were gonna be active, or was it too far away and so it kind of wore off by the time you played? So there's a little bit more digging into what works for the individual, and I think that more questions need to be asked rather than saying like, well, that food's bad. We don't need to be working with it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like this is kind of an extreme example, but I had a teammate and she ended up going pro. It's she would always eat like McDonald's or like In-N-Out before a game, just like big burger, fries. Like I would have puked, you know what I mean? Like I had to have my thing 2 to 3 hours out, something pretty simple, but it's like for her it worked and she balled out. So it's like, I'm not saying to do that, but like you just have to kind of experiment a little bit instead of following these blanket answers.
And I wouldn't have, if that worked for her, then I wouldn't have touched it. I wouldn't have said, you know what, I don't like that you're eating that stuff. Like, okay, well, let's leave that alone. Like, let's look at some other ways, let's see what else you're doing,
Right.
And I think that is a really great example that people can do one thing, like one person can do one thing, and then someone else like understands their body more to say like, I need more time. Like you knew that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you mentioned a second ago, like people don't know what I do with clients. Like give us a little snippet. Like how do you work with clients? Because I'm just curious myself.
Yeah, I think that people come to me because they want to build a strategy that works for them, and so usually like the very first few sessions that we have, it's really getting to know what they're currently doing, what they're currently eating, if they're not eating anything, what are their non-food negotiables. Like I've had people that are like, I want pizza, I want this and that. It's like, okay, like, do you have any food allergies? Because we're going to make sure that that's not in there. And so eventually, like as we go through all this stuff, we're just making sure that they're eating enough during their every single day, and then starting to create meals that they at least know this framework, and then they can start to swap out stuff whenever, if they're at home. It's like mom's making chicken and rice and green beans. Great. Like, you know how to do that. Well, what happens if you go to Chipotle? What does that even look like? So they start to learn how to make these meals that are based off of like what sounds good to them. What do they have time for? What do their parents, in terms of like planning and prepping and going to the grocery store, all of that stuff, like what do they even have time for? And so it's really just problem solving, but helping the family and the young athlete to really learn like they can trust themselves to be able to make food decisions that honor what their food preferences are, and also help them to like really tune into like how they're feeling. Like if they don't necessarily feel hungry, but they have just played, well, they may not want a big meal right afterwards. what can we do? Could we have like some liquid,
Right.
like a smoothie or something that they consume, just so that they're understanding that they gotta refuel after they've played. So really, it's just putting it back, giving them these tools so that they can be more independent, because when they do go off to college, like no one's going to be holding their hand.
Yeah.
And some of them may have more resources than others, and those that don't have a lot of resources at their college or university will still be able to navigate meals and snacks and be able to do all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I love that so much because, yeah, it really is like you're empowering them to trust themselves. And it's something that they're going to take with them for the rest of their lives, probably.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're learning, like, to number one, check in with themselves to see how do I actually feel after I eat this food? Like, so often we eat food and we feel like crap after, and then we just keep eating that same thing. And it's like it just
Yeah.
becomes a habit of us not checking in. And so I think
Yeah.
that's such a cool skill. It's like it's not like you're just telling them what to eat. You're showing them how to adjust in different situations and really tap into that and then make adjustments off of that feeling. So I'm glad that I
Exactly.
asked that question.
Well, and like, why would I, like, what does it benefit me for them to have to depend on me for the rest of
Yeah.
their lives in order to make decisions about foods? Like, that's
Right.
not the kind of business that I want to create. And I think that
Right.
that's really like sleazy marketing if that happens with other people. These individuals need to learn how to trust themselves and not rely on external rules and people telling them like you need to eat this, not that. And then it just creates a lot of like, I don't know, it just creates a really poor mental health really goes down the drain when people can't trust themselves.
Right. Yeah, their confidence goes down, like their body image is probably going to go down and it's
Oh
like
yeah.
yeah, then from there it's just like everything becomes asking other people what's right for them versus tapping
Yeah.
in and, asking themselves, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and it's just so much more than food. So I love what you do, and it's yeah, you're creating. A lot of businesses will try to create almost a codependent relationship, so that they're like always have to be working with them, and you're doing the opposite of that. You're like creating girls and families that can go off and do this on their own and trust that they can do it on their own.
Yeah. That's always my goal, just because I like I want someone who's like 10, 15 right now who eventually, has dreams of playing in college, or maybe they quit soccer altogether and they want to do Ironmans, and like they can take the same principles, and maybe they still need to learn a little bit about that specific activity, but they already have a solid foundation, and they're not like relying on someone for the rest of their
Yeah,
lives.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's a couple months ago. I think. Well, actually, it was less than a couple months ago. But when fall was starting up, so it was still at the end of the summer, and I was curious. I asked my parents, like in my email newsletter and stuff. I was like, hey, what is like the biggest challenge for you now that school's starting up and like sports seasons are starting up? Like, what's your biggest challenge? What are you most nervous about? And a lot of the responses, probably more than 75% of the responses were, I want to make sure that I'm providing my child with healthy meals and not knowing how to do that with like such a busy schedule. Like there was so many responses related to that. So I'd love to hear. I know like a lot of parents this is something they struggle with, and I get it. Like how can parents kind of provide those like healthy, nutritious meals and snacks with like the craziness of youth sports in school?
Oh, this, yeah, I think I don't know it. I don't know a soccer parent who isn't thinking about that.
Yeah.
That is really difficult, because I think that, whether they have 1, 2, 3 plus kids, schedules during the week are busy, schedules on the weekends are busy. And I think that, some pressure that I've heard from some of my clients has been like the feeling like they need to have home cooked meals every single like night.
Yeah.
And I think that works for some families. And then other families, I think it's understanding that being able to, either use a meal prep service if that's something that your family can afford, or like knowing that you could still go through the drive-through.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, a fed child is better than a child that doesn't get anything.
Absolutely,
and figuring out maybe how meal planning and meal prepping works for you. Maybe you do crock pot meals, you throw it in the crock pot in the morning, and then by the time you get home, it's done. The Instant Pot, or, maybe you do a combo of, a few meals at home that you feel like you could make, and then the others are purchased outside of the home, because literally, we can still find plenty of balanced options that are available. There's a lot more options that are available now than there were, 20, 30 years ago. Sure. So I think it's in a way relaxing and looking at the big picture versus like, this meal has to be perfect or my kid is going to X, Y, and Z.
Right. Yeah, I mean, looking back at my childhood, like 3 kids, all played sports, 2 working parents. It's like we ate out a lot of breakfast burritos at Beto's, and a lot of Wiener Schnitzel, and just a lot of that kind of stuff. But then also it's like my mom worked, 10, 12 hours a day a lot of times, and she would have to, throw something in the crock pot, or, make something easy like spaghetti and just kind of let it sit there on the stove, and just kind of finding ways to make it work without feeling like you have to be perfect. Because I feel like parents probably do put a lot of pressure on themselves that it has to look a certain way.
Yeah, and I feel for parents, because there is so much pressure to be this like perfect parent, and at the end of the day, all parents just want to do their best. They want happy, healthy children, and there are many ways to get there. There's not one road to get to there. And I think that your story, like you sharing that, is very similar to mine. And I'm an only child. Both my parents worked full time. I was my parents went through the drive-through line, and that's where I ate most of my meals, except on the weekend, maybe just like Saturday, if we even had that available, that we would make a family meal. But we were all so busy. And, I think that it is where we don't have to have, we don't need to put extra pressure to be able to have kids that are going to have enough energy to perform, to have a positive relationship with food, and to be happy and healthy.
Yeah, I love that you said that, like, there's not like one way, there's not like one path. Like, there's a million different ways to get to where you want to go, and it doesn't have to look like someone else's. And I always talk about, how athletes are always comparing themselves, but parents are doing the same. Like, parents are on social media too. Parents are saying, like, all my friends are parents now. And so it's just like all kids and parent stuff on my feed a lot of the time. And it's like, I'm sure parents go through the comparison just as much, if not more, than like athletes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I couldn't imagine. And I think it's just really tough because...
And there's so much judgment too around it.
Oh.
Like if you don't parent your kids a certain way, right?
Yeah, I mean, like there are so many ways to parent, and we all have opinions, and we all need to just keep our opinions to ourselves, because someone is just doing their best. Like, we're all just trying to do the best that we can.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great topic, because it goes so much further than just nutrition. So I'm glad that we went down this pathway here.
Yeah, there's overlap.
Yeah, and another kind of, I guess, parent question, keeping on the same theme, is like, I mean, I guess we kind of touched on it a little bit about how they can support and, preparing the food and just doing the best they can. But also, like, what is their role in leading by example and, like, modeling how they want their kid to eat? Like, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think modeling is very important. And I think that, I look back on my younger years, and what I appreciate from my parents is that they didn't judge what foods I was eating. So they weren't making comments like, you need to eat this, like why aren't you eating this? So they kept meal times very neutral. So I think that being able for parents to also be aware of the language that they use when talking about foods or even talking about their bodies. I think that parents can model eating a variety of foods. So like showing your kids that like it is okay if you don't like broccoli. We can you're going to see me eating some other things, but also you might see me enjoying a donut or ice cream or whatever it is and not shaming myself in eating it. It's how we fit all this stuff in. So that's one way. I think that, modeling how, this is what we do as a family in terms of like preparing. So, I'm going to cut up some stuff. Do you want to cut some stuff up with me? Yeah. That way you can kind of get them into the kitchen and around those foods. And then this is what we do as a family after. I think watching language and letting them see, you eating a variety of foods and not talking negatively about anyone. Yeah. Keeping it very neutral is a big theme of mine.
Yeah, I was thinking like just in terms of like eating, like modeling by eating, but you took it a step further with it's about how you talk about the food. It's about how you talk about your body. It's about how, and I love like the neutral, like we're coming in, we're not shaming ourselves or shaming the food or shaming other people. It's like the food is just kind of this neutral thing. And there's this saying that I like, which take it with a grain of salt, but a happy donut is better than a sad salad. So it's like, if you have all these negative emotions around the food you're eating, you're probably not going to be able to digest that and take all the nutrients out of that thing. Whereas if you had a positive, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I say something. I love that phrase. I think that when I work with clients, I really want to encourage them, like, your eating environment is very important, because if parents or like family, your brothers and sisters, if you're fighting with each other, like that meal is not going to be good. It could be your most favorite meal. It could be your birthday meal and it could be ruined. So I think it's, even the meal environment needs to be, hopefully a positive one, or at least one where we're not talking about, really heavy
politics
subjects. Like keep that stuff away from the dinner table. But
that's good. Okay, cool. Kind of shifting gears a little bit. Because I know a lot of the times athletes like aren't eating enough, and I know that's something that you probably like deal with, and I've seen stuff on your social media. So what are some kind of like red flags where a parent or even an athlete could determine like, hey, I'm not eating enough, or my daughter's not eating enough? What can we look for there?
Yeah, I think there's some like really like some simple like day-to-day signs, but I think in the long term, so like day-to-day would be like stomach is kind of always empty, stomach rumbling, maybe thinking about food 24/7, being irritable. That can be a sign that you likely need to eat. But when we really look at long term, when someone hasn't been eating enough, we can really get into some health consequences. So like our reproductive health. So for menstruating individuals, like if a female athlete should have reached the point where they're supposed to have a period but they haven't, that's where I would want to look at, what are they doing? Are they eating enough, all of their meals? What do their meals even look like? Are they having snacks? How was their training like? Because if they're not having their period, or they're having inconsistent periods, or they did, but then it stopped for a while, that's going to affect bone health, and that's going to put them at risk for more injuries. And then there's just all these health systems that start to kind of have this cascade effect. And it could also lead to some like depression and just poor mental health as well. So I think that, you know, these parents need to, you know, look at that. They also just need to check in with their kid and ask them, like, how are you doing? Are you struggling with concentrating during school? Because if you are, then are you eating enough to support you actually focusing in class? Because that can be something that I think is a really easy check-in to have with kids.
Yeah, no, those are really good signs to look for, especially like amenorrhea is I don't know how much you, and I don't really know that much about it. Is that mainly caused by like maybe a energy deficit? Is that like one of the main causes? Do you know?
Low energy availability, and that's unfortunate, just because a lot of kids are training so much. Like, they're not just involved in one team, maybe they're involved in two, or maybe they're doing multiple sports, and they're almost training every single day, intensely. And so it's like a struggle, because these kids we're trying to get them to grow and develop into their adult body, but food is literally energy. Calories are a unit of energy, and if they're not getting enough energy, then those systems, like the reproductive system, is going to be like, well, we got to conserve, so we're going to shut this one down because this one's really important, and so our body is really smart, so it's going to stop doing certain things so that we can prioritize other things. So when these kids are trying to grow and develop, but they're not eating enough, it's going to just compound, like issues are going to compound on top of another one. So if they're not, you know, essentially the body, if they are experiencing amenorrhea, like the body's just saying, like, not a priority.
Okay, something interesting about that I wanted to ask you about, because I'm sure this happens with other people, and it happened with me. So when I was 12, I tore my ACL, like, really young, right? And I was a kid, they called me like a garbage disposal. Like, I ate a lot, you know what I mean? But I was like a twig. And then when I got hurt, I continued to eat as much as I did. And I got a little bit chubby, so to say. Like, there was times when my mom was like, hey, you know, are you sure you need all that food? And like stuff like that. And I kind of started to have like a chubby phase for a lot of my kind of teenage years, and that's, you know, was I really that chubby? No, but it was something that I was a little bit self-conscious of, just because I didn't have a six-pack like my teammates. So like, do you ever deal with athletes or parents like knowing how to talk to their kids about, hey, are you eating too much? Like, does that ever come up?
It does. And it's like a fun little dance, because you know, it's like sometimes easier to talk to parents who are like, I need my kid, you know, my kid's scrawny, and they'll, you know,
that's way
that it's
easier.
Like, what does this look like? But then it's like, if I have a parent that is concerned about their child's body, then I don't necessarily ask more questions about the kid. I'm just wanting to get an idea of, where is this parent? What's their fear? Where are they coming from? Because, you know, your situation, I think the ACL tear, and then the fact that you were at that age, I think is tricky, because you are like, you were growing and developing. So like, we're going to all have these awkward phases. It just happened to be like, you just got this really severe injury, and it kind of like muddied the water with what that, you know, even looked like. But I think overall with parents, I think it's understanding that like, weight loss is for any like child, adolescent, weight loss is not advised. Like, that is not something that we need to be concerned about. It would be something that we would say, like, well, if you're finding that they are just like endless amounts of like Cheeto puffs and they can't seem to get enough, well, then is that food like never available except for one time, because they might be a situation where they feel like, well, I don't know when I'm going to get this again. I got to eat as much of this as possible. Or if it's something that isn't like that, then maybe we just need to go and have them get checked out by their pediatrician, see if there's some other underlying things going on, but weight loss generally is never advised for this population.
Yeah, because I mean, I've had, back when I was doing in-person soccer training, I had a couple parents that were like, hey, my kid's a little heavy, like I want her to work out with you so she can, she needs to run more, like she needs to lose a little bit of weight. And I just never knew really how to approach that. And even doing confidence stuff, it's like I've had a couple parents who it's like, hey, my daughter is a little bit on the bigger side and she's just not confident in her body. And I've never had a parent ask me how to navigate that necessarily. So I just wanted to ask, because I know it's maybe not as common as others, but I'm sure it still comes up fairly often enough.
It does. And I think there's always going to be that concern, because our society, unfortunately, views people that are in thinner bodies as they're not going to get any negative comments or looks towards them versus people that are in larger bodies. So I think that, we need to understand what our own bias is, and then understand that these kids don't need to know that we're concerned about their bodies. Because then they will be they're very, oh my gosh, I have talked with enough adults to know that their many decades of body image issues and likely eating disorder came from a parent or adult or coach who shared with them that they were concerned that they were gaining some weight when they were just in a period of growth that their body needed to, because a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old shouldn't look like the same adult. I mean, it shouldn't look like the same human when they're 30.
Right.
That would be weird.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting, because when I was saying the story, I was like chubby. I'm thinking back, I was like, I really wasn't chubby, but I think I don't know, the comparison to other people, where I was just had bigger cheeks and a little more on carrying around the stomach than my parents, than my mom, for sure. My mom hasn't had a six-pack forever. And so I think just that comparison, it's like, I really wasn't chubby, or there wasn't anything to worry about, but the smallest seeds can plant something, in a kid.
Yeah, unfortunately, those comments, because I've worked in eating disorders for the last few years, and it is one of the hardest things to shift in someone once it's already been planted. So why are we going to handicap a child when they're 8, 9, 10 in high school, whatever, by saying that their body is not good enough now? They're not expected to be professional. So let's again look at big picture and say they showed up today. They gave their best effort. Let's keep developing that, because that's going to take time. People on the U.S. national team, this is decades of honing skills and foundations that these kids are at the very beginning of their career. Let's foster that, and not, well, you need to change your body because you're slow.
Right. Yeah. No, I've heard that from a lot of parents that have told me that, from coaches that had said that, and I'm like, oh dear, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so for parents that are okay, well, I care about my daughter, obviously, and that's the thing, is my mom wasn't trying to do anything. She was just trying to, help me. And all parents are, like we had talked about.
Exactly.
Is it more than of just modeling, like we talked about, if they do feel like their daughter is a little bit overweight and they're, you know what I mean, or underweight, or I guess what's the answer? Is it just modeling?
I think it's not just modeling, but I think the parents have to do some work here. I think the parent needs to be the one who is not bringing these issues to the child, because that's not the child's issue. That's a culture, that's the parents' expectations.
Yeah.
I think that the parent needs to just do some work that is, is this something that I am fearful of, that they are going to be in a larger body forever, and that maybe they're going to be judged,
Yeah.
Is that what I'm fearing? Or, is there something else underlying? Because we can't escape it. Our culture is really tough on people. And I think that that's not something that we don't need to bring the kid into it. I think modeling is great, but that's not the expectation for that kid to just look at mom who's running every single day, because that might also, we don't know if that's a disordered relationship with exercise. I don't know.
For sure, yeah. No, that's a great point.
So,
yeah, no, I'm really glad I asked that, and because it is more than just modeling. A lot of times it's like if you want your child to be healthier, it's or whatever, it's it has to start with you, and it's for you to ask yourself, well, why am I concerned? Is it just a looks thing? Is it just because I don't want people to judge me based on how my child looks? And I think it is going inward first and figuring that out. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Those are great. Even I think you saying am I going to be judged? That brings it back to how tough it is to be a parent. You're judged for everything that's even outside of your control. If your kid behaves a certain way, if they how they are on the field, everything. So it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it is a kid's a reflection of the parent, and sometimes that's true, and sometimes I don't think it is. And it's if my kid is misbehaving, or if they're overweight or whatever, then it means that I'm doing something wrong, and I think that can be really, really dangerous.
Yeah, very.
This was a great conversation, Jaimee.
I know.
I didn't know we were going to
go asked really great questions.
Well, you sparked them on. I'm so glad we went kind of where we went with this. I think it's going to be really, really helpful for parents, not just with nutrition, but just, with everything. And so I want to kind of leave with, if you have any resources or where parents can learn more about you and your services and stuff, we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I have a website, thesoccernutritionist.com. You can also get my, I have a freebie that you can download. It's got some 10-minute meals for busy athletes. You can also get that on my website. And then I have some other services. So I do team presentations. I have a course for parents. So just some small stuff.
That's cool. Yeah, I think that 10-minute meals for busy athletes, I feel that's really, really valuable, I'm sure.
Yeah. Because we're all busy.
I was going to say, everyone's running around with their head cut off. I'm not. Yeah. I'm chilling. But a lot of people are. Well, thanks again, Jaimee, for coming on. I really appreciate you and your wisdom and your expertise. So thanks again for coming on, and I'm sure it won't be the last time.
Well, thank you, Shay. I always enjoy talking with you. I'm glad that we've connected again after all these years.
I know. Thanks again, Jaimee.
Thank you.